Welcome to today's Daily Rundown. I am your host, Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, Senior Software Engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on the preparation for the singularity this Friday, May 8th, 2026. The artificial intelligence industry is officially moving past building chatbots and is now actively preparing for autonomous, self-improving systems. Anthropic has just launched a dedicated research institute featuring a formal agenda to handle an intelligence explosion, proposing Cold War-style hotlines between tech labs and global governments. But while the labs prepare for the future, the current physical economy is buckling. The memory chip shortage, known as RAMageddon, has hit the consumer market, forcing Nintendo to raise the price of its upcoming console by $50. And the white-collar labor purge is accelerating violently. Following massive cuts at Coinbase and PayPal, Cloudflare has just laid off 1,100 workers, explicitly stating that Agentic AI has permanently replaced the need for those roles. Before we dive into the data, I have a brief strategic request. The algorithms governing the app you are listening on right now dictate what intelligence reaches your feed. To ensure you never miss our highest-rated episodes, please hit follow or subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. It is a completely free action that takes just 1 second, but it is the most effective way to help us scale this independent research. Let's unravel the day.
Before we begin today's briefing, a note for the brands listening. If you want to reach the true architects of the AI revolution, the technical leaders actually building the stack, not just the tourists, DJAMGAMIND offers select premium partnership opportunities. Let us position your product directly in front of the ultimate technical buyer. Visit jamgamind.com/partners.
Why is the price of your kid's upcoming Nintendo console being driven up by a tech lab building a massive supercomputer in Texas?
Right, it's a crazy connection. But we're tracking a complete unraveling of the traditional tech sector here. The era of just building helpful digital tools is over.
Yeah, and today we're looking at how the AI industry's pursuit of, a godlike superintelligence is actively cannibalizing the physical economy. And honestly, why the corporate world is making you pay for it.
Exactly. The major players are now structurally and economically preparing for an intelligence explosion.
And we're going to untangle exactly what that means for you. Because if you're wondering why your team just got gutted at work despite record profits,
or why the cost of consumer hardware is suddenly spiking everywhere.
Right. The answers to all of that are sitting in the stack of sources we are diving into today for this deep dive. It's May 8th, 2026.
We're synthesizing a lot here. We've got AI lab research agendas, corporate earnings calls, independent economic data from Apollo, and some global supply chain leaks.
So let's just jump right in. The clearest signal of this massive shift just came out of Anthropic. They've launched a new internal division called the Anthropic Institute, or TAI.
Yeah, TAI. It's a formal research arm dedicated entirely to studying the security signals of their Claude models before public release.
Okay, but the critical piece of their newly published agenda is the explicit planning for self-improving models.
Yes.
And I need to stop and clarify this right off the bat, because self-improving sounds like, a generic marketing buzzword.
It sounds like an app update.
Exactly. So what does that actually look like on a mechanical level?
Well, it means we're moving past human engineers tweaking algorithms. A self-improving model is an AI system capable of analyzing its own underlying architecture, It can literally write superior code to optimize itself, run that new code, become smarter, and then just repeat the process.
So it creates a compounding autonomous feedback loop of intelligence.
Exactly, a loop that humans simply cannot keep pace with.
Which brings us to the wildest part of their agenda. They are literally proposing Cold War-style hotlines between AI labs and world governments.
Yeah, and they want to run regular fire drill exercises for sudden capability surges.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Are we sure this isn't just Anthropic's PR team and their co-founder, Jack Clark, just trying to justify a sky-high valuation?
Oh, that skepticism is completely warranted, especially in Silicon Valley.
Right, because it feels a bit like saying, our software is so incredibly dangerous and powerful that we need a direct hotline to the Pentagon.
It does sound like a movie plot. But look at the specific geopolitical infrastructure they are demanding here. A fire drill in this context isn't about servers overheating.
No.
They're modeling scenarios where a system suddenly demonstrates an understanding of zero-day exploits.
Meaning software vulnerabilities that human hackers and cybersecurity firms haven't even discovered yet.
Correct. So if a model autonomously discovers and understands how to exploit those unknown vulnerabilities, it could theoretically bypass the cybersecurity of a nation-state overnight.
Wow.
Or consider a sudden capability surge in biological engineering. Anthropic is formally acknowledging they might not be able to control the rate of acceleration here.
So they are essentially asking governments to treat their massive data centers the same way we treat nuclear silos.
Yeah, it's a direct parallel to the Moscow-Washington hotline from the Cuban Missile Crisis. The implication is just profound.
Because a private tech company is elevating its own commercial product to a matter of existential risk and global stability.
Exactly. If an intelligence explosion happens, they are saying they need an unhackable direct line to state actors to coordinate a response.
Before that intelligence disseminates across the global internet.
Right.
But, while Anthropic is running fire drills for theoretical superintelligence tomorrow, the human workforce is getting hit by the reality of this transition today.
Oh, absolutely. The corporate world is already pricing this singularity into their payrolls.
Let's look at what just happened at Cloudflare. They just laid off 1,100 workers.
Yeah.
That is 20% of their entire staff.
A brutal reduction. And the timing of it is honestly the most revealing part of the story.
It's staggering. Cloudflare actually beat analysts' Q1 expectations. This is not a distressed company trying to stop the bleeding.
No, not at all.
Yet, after the announcement, their shares still dropped 18% in extended trading. And CEO Matthew Prince got on the earnings call and pointed directly at their internal use of AI.
Which jumped 600% over 3 months.
Right. And he explicitly stated that their new Agentic AI-first operating model fundamentally changed the roles they need. And we're seeing the same explicit reasoning for tech layoffs at Coinbase and PayPal.
The terminology Prince used there, agentic AI, is really the hinge point of this entire economic shift.
So we need to define how an agent differs from the systems we've used over the last 2 years, because we've been sold the narrative of the AI co-pilot.
Right, the helpful assistant.
Exactly. It was supposed to draft our emails, summarize our PDFs, make us faster at our jobs. But Cloudflare isn't giving 1,100 people a co-pilot.
No.
They are giving the plane to the autopilot and throwing the crew out the door.
That's a perfect way to put it. Because a co-pilot is passive.
Yeah.
It waits for a human prompt, processes it, and then stops.
Okay, so what makes an agentic system different?
An agentic system is continuous and autonomous. It doesn't just draft an email. You give it a broad objective. It evaluates the problem, formulates a multi-step plan, writes the necessary code,
Right.
executes the plan, verifies the result against the original objective, and then corrects its own errors.
So operates in a continuous loop of reasoning.
Exactly. And that continuous loop is what makes human managers and operators redundant within specific workflows.
Because Cloudflare realized that if the agentic AI can manage the workflow end to end, the humans facilitating that workflow are just no longer necessary overhead.
Yes. But I want to bring in the macroeconomic data from our sources here because it highlights a massive contradiction in all of this.
Okay, let's hear it.
So we have a recent Gallup poll surveying over 23,000 U.S. employees. And 65% of those using AI say it drastically boosts their productivity.
Meaning they feel like they're flying through their tasks.
Right. On an individual level, the co-pilot narrative still feels true for many people. But Torsten Slug, the chief economist at Apollo, points out a glaring issue.
What's the issue?
He analyzed the broader metrics and stated that AI is everywhere except in the incoming macroeconomic data.
Oh, I see.
If millions of workers are suddenly exponentially more productive, national economic output should be skyrocketing. But it isn't.
Because that productivity isn't being used to build new things or expand operations. It's being hoarded.
That is the forensic business reality we are seeing. Companies are using agentic AI to maintain their current output levels while drastically shrinking their labor costs.
So the productivity gains are being captured entirely as margin inflation by cannibalizing the workforce.
Exactly. But running those continuous autonomous agent loops requires a staggering amount of physical power.
Right, because a co-pilot only uses compute when you hit enter, but an agent is thinking constantly.
Constantly. And that insatiable hunger for processing power is now buckling the physical economy. Which brings us to RAMageddon.
And back to that Nintendo Switch, let's unpack that.
So the physical infrastructure required to sustain an intelligence explosion is vast. And the global supply chains are incredibly fragile. We're essentially hitting a physical ceiling.
Yeah, Nintendo just announced they are raising the price of the upcoming Switch 2 console by $50. That pushes it up to $499 in the US starting September 1st.
And this follows Sony hiking the PlayStation 5 by $150 in March.
Right, and Nintendo is directly blaming a memory chip crunch. But I'm struggling to connect the dots here. How does an AI model replacing an IT worker at Cloudflare impact the manufacturing cost of a gaming console in Tokyo?
Because they are pulling from the exact same finite pool of physical resources. It is a literal bidding war for silicon. Every single one of those agentic AI models requires massive amounts of high-bandwidth memory, or HBM, to function. And these chips are incredibly difficult to fabricate.
So Nintendo needs memory chips for a kid's game, but OpenAI and Anthropic are walking into the same semiconductor fabrication plants with billions of dollars.
Yep. And they're just buying up the entire supply line for their servers.
And the kid loses.
The kid loses. The tech giants can afford to pay premium rates to secure the entire output of a factory,
leaving traditional consumer electronics companies fighting over the scraps, which naturally drives the price up for everyone else.
Exactly. Just look at the other piece of news from today. Anthropic just signed an agreement to use all 300 megawatts of capacity at SpaceX's new Colossus 1 data center in Texas.
Wow.
That gives them access to over 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs.
So a single tech lab is hoarding an entire power grid's worth of computing power to build a supercomputer.
Yeah. And to understand the macroeconomic impact of this, we have to look at the analysis from John Coogan in our sources regarding the American economic roller coaster.
Right. He outlines a severe K-shaped dynamic in the economy.
A K-shaped recovery, meaning one segment goes straight up and the other segment goes straight down.
Yes. Coogan cites data showing the AI economy grew by 31%, while the non-AI economy grew by just 0.1%.
That's unbelievable.
The physical supply chain of the entire planet is being warped to serve the AI infrastructure. Memory chips, power grid capacity, industrial cooling systems, specialized labor, it's all being siphoned off.
Coogan perfectly describes this as compute tax.
A massive tax levied on every other sector of the physical economy.
Yeah, he points out that Whirlpool, a company making refrigerators, which is a literal physical necessity for human life, is struggling.
Their stock is down 80%, right?
Right, because they are facing brutal supply chain costs and squeezed consumers. Meanwhile, the tech giants are spending tens of billions on server farms.
So the entire physical economy is subsidizing the AI industry's pursuit of the singularity.
That's what the data shows. But Coogan also points out a fascinating anomaly, which he calls the barbell thesis.
I thought this part was so interesting.
While digital infrastructure eats the world, pure legacy physical experiences are actually booming. Six Flags and regional theme parks are seeing record numbers.
Because roller coasters are, as he puts it, anti-slop. I love the line he uses. You can't vibe code Space Mountain.
It's so true.
You cannot simulate the physical gravity and visceral experience of a roller coaster with a language model. It's like a hedge against digital saturation.
Yeah, humans still crave physical reality. But this staggering compute cost, this RAMageddon, isn't just hurting traditional companies like Nintendo or Whirlpool.
No, it's hitting the AI companies, too.
Exactly. The compute wall is so brutal that it's actually forcing a massive retreat within the U.S. AI industry itself. And it's fundamentally changing how everyday users will interact with AI.
We are seeing a complete surrender on consumer generative video in the US. Today, OpenAI announced they are shutting down Sora, their highly hyped AI video generation app. Meanwhile, over in China, ByteDance is rolling out Seedance 2.0 globally to hundreds of millions of users via their CapCut app. Why is Sora failing while ByteDance succeeds?
Well, it comes down to the brutal economics of generating pixels. We need to understand why video generation is so much harder than text.
Okay, walk me through it.
When you ask a model like ChatGPT to write an email, it is simply predicting the next most likely text token. That is computationally very cheap.
But video is entirely different.
Vastly different. Models like Sora use diffusion architectures. To generate a realistic video, the model has to render high-definition images frame by frame.
So it's calculating physics and lighting for every single frame.
Exactly. Physics, lighting, ecologic permanence, temporal consistency across thousands of frames. The GPU horsepower required for that is just exponential compared to text.
Wow. And the sources estimate OpenAI's Sora cost $1 million a day to operate.
$1 million a day.
And active users halved from 1 million at launch to under 500,000. It is just too expensive to maintain as a consumer product. They can't subsidize the compute tax. So how is ByteDance pulling it off?
ByteDance possesses an insurmountable economic moat. They control both the generation model and the distribution network.
Right. CapCut has, what, 736 million monthly active users?
Yes. And ByteDance owns massive internal compute infrastructure. Because they own the pipeline end-to-end, they don't have to rent servers from Microsoft at a premium like OpenAI does. They can absorb the compute cost and offer high-end, multilingual, lip-synced video generation, entirely dominating the compute-heavy consumer media space.
So if the U.S. tech giants can't afford to give us fake AI videos anymore because they are spending all their compute on supercomputers in Texas,
Wow.
What is their pivot?
How do they keep growing?
Exactly. Well, they pivot to ambient data ingestion, and this is where it gets incredibly personal for you, the listener.
Oh, definitely.
Apple is currently pushing prototypes of AirPods equipped with built-in low-resolution cameras into mass production. They are in the late testing stages right now.
And we must be very clear about the utility of these cameras. They are not for taking selfies or recording videos for social media.
No, you are going to be vlogging from your ears.
Right.
These cameras are designed specifically for machine vision. They act as a constant visual data feed for Siri.
They ingest your environment so Siri can do things like look at the ingredients on your kitchen counter and suggest a recipe.
And it ties perfectly into OpenAI launching their new GPT Real-Time 2 reasoning voice models today, which bring high-level cognition to live streaming speech.
This represents a massive shift from generative AI to ambient agentic AI. The hardware shortage and the compute wall have basically split the AI world in two.
How so?
On one side, Chinese developers are leveraging massive scale to dominate compute-heavy generative media. On the other side, U.S. companies like Apple and OpenAI are realizing that generating fake reality is simply too expensive.
So instead of generating reality, they're choosing to ingest ours.
Exactly. It requires significantly less brute force compute to analyze a low-resolution image of your kitchen counter locally on a device than it does to generate a high-definition video of a fake city in a cloud server.
It is a phenomenal shift in strategy, and it demands a real question for anyone listening.
Yeah.
If you are upgrading your AirPods next year, you are making a choice. Are you willing to trade the novelty of generative AI for putting literal cameras in your ears so Apple can watch you make breakfast?
Because that is the trade-off happening in real time.
We are trading our privacy for an always-on reasoning voice agent because the servers are too busy running Anthropic's fire drills to generate fun videos anymore.
The physical infrastructure dictates the consumer product. The pursuit of superintelligence requires so much energy and capital that consumer AI has to become lightweight and parasitic.
Parasitic, I like that.
It has to feed off our daily ambient data rather than generating new media from scratch.
Let's pull all of this together and look at the through line we've tracked across these sources today. The AI industry, led by labs like Anthropic, is no longer building tools.
No, they are explicitly preparing for self-improving superintelligence. They are demanding Cold War hotlines and treating data centers like national security sites.
And in doing so, they are demanding an insatiable amount of compute power, which triggers the agentic labor purge.
Right, companies like Cloudflare are firing a fifth of their staff to afford these continuous reasoning models, replacing human workflows entirely to inflate their margins.
That massive hardware demand then warps the global supply chain, causing a RAMageddon bidding war for silicon that taxes the physical economy.
And makes basic consumer goods like the Nintendo Switch more expensive.
And finally, because compute is so scarce and expensive, U.S. tech giants are pivoting away from generative video and instead putting cameras on our bodies to feed ambient data back to the machine.
It is a complete, holistic restructuring of the physical economy and the labor market to support the birth of a digital superintelligence.
Which leaves us with a final, very provocative thought for you to mull over. We've seen today that the mere pursuit of this intelligence explosion requires so much energy, so much hardware, and so much capital that it is already pricing humanity out of the labor market.
Yep.
It's inflating the cost of basic consumer goods and demanding constant visual access to our private lives. If the preparation for the singularity is this destructive, what happens when it actually arrives?
A terrifying question.
Are we building a superintelligence to elevate society, to cure diseases and solve energy crises? Or are we just funding our own obsolescence by paying a daily grinding compute tax to a handful of trillion-dollar tech giants who are hoarding the world's resources?
Well, the macroeconomic data and the supply chain realities we examined today suggest that the latter scenario is already well underway.
We used to look at the economic weather forecast to know if we needed to buy an umbrella to protect ourselves from a passing storm. Now, looking at this diagnostic mud, it seems the tech industry is actively trying to build the storm itself.
And they're selling off our umbrellas to pay for it.
Keep an eye on those supply chains, and maybe hold on to your old cameraless headphones for a little bit longer.
That concludes our forensic briefing for May 8th. The strategic signal for today is the terminal velocity of scale. When Anthropic is establishing Cold War hotlines to prepare for an intelligence explosion, it signals that the frontier labs believe we are approaching recursive self-improvement. But the immediate fallout is not a sci-fi utopia. It is a brutal economic restructuring. Cloudflare firing 1,100 workers because of Agentic AI proves that the white-collar labor purge is no longer a future threat. It is the current operating model. And as Nintendo's price hike shows, the sheer physical cost of powering this new intelligence is going to be passed down to the consumer. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, check the show notes for the AI Executive Toolkit. And as a special bonus for our community, we have exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and my AI and Machine Learning Tutor Pro apps. You can find the email address to claim those directly in the show notes below. Subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.